And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone number is 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Today is Kevin Miller's cash code, money code word is pool. Pool, you could win up to $5,000 by listening 3 times daily at 6 a.m., 8 a.m. to the Kevin Miller Show and to the 3 p.m. hour of the Sean Hannity Show. When you hear the Kevin Miller money code words, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com, type them in. The more words you get, the more chances you have to win up to $5,000. Joining us now, a gentleman who was born in Boise, Idaho, now in Austin, Texas, Dr. John Huber. Dr. Huber, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Is there any way we can convince you to come home?
Well, let's see, it's 70 degrees here. What is it there?
42 right now, but it'll be about 70 later on.
I don't know. My bones are kind of used to a little bit warmer weather right now.
I guess warmer weather and barbecue.
Oh, yeah, lots of barbecue.
Hey,
lots of barbecue.
Let's talk a little bit about something that you want to warn people about across the country, and that's this latest internet challenge. And when I first saw this story, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was, something I'd have to go to Snopes or something to look at to see if this is real. But for parents that have kids with cell phones or mobile devices, this is something very troubling.
It's very troubling. The Momo challenge. And what it does is it basically does data mining on a kid's phone and then turns around and the AI part of it, the artificial intelligence, starts giving challenges to the child and says, look, we know what you've been doing. And they use a little bit of the evidence that they got off your phone. And if you don't do this, we're gonna tell everybody what you've done. And every time you do that, the challenge escalates. At one point, one of the challenges is jumping off a roof of a house, but we know we've lost at least 2 kids to this, one a 12-year-old girl, another one, I believe, a 14 or 16-year-old boy.
So how do kids come across the Momo challenge? Again, you hear it, and it goes back to, names in our childhood, but the Momo challenge, how did this come about, and how do kids go from, surfing Facebook to this?
Well, it looks like it came out of Argentina, and it's been distributed on an app called WhatsApp. Then once that got identified, they got it input into Minecraft, which is a very popular game. And in the last 3 to 4 weeks, Microsoft has gotten in there and shut that down, thank goodness. It's probably... At this point, we've done a lot of things to shut it down as a culture, within the social media apps. But the important thing to know is they had a similar challenge like this in Russia this past spring, and they lost 160 kids to suicide. It's not something to take lightly, and unfortunately, as parents, we tend to be behind the 8 ball in this. In other words, the kids know more about the apps and how to use them and how to identify these things than we do. So I'm out there advocating that parents stay on top of what their kids are doing. One of the best ways to do that are using some of these programs that, use the apps themselves to watch what your kids are into. And there's several of them that don't require you to sit there and know everything. They just say, hey, wait a minute, this app's on your kid's phone. You need to do something about it. And they stay on top of it. One of them is from Semantics, which is a very well-known antivirus company. And in some cases, when you buy your antivirus for the computer on your desktop or your laptop, it's included in that in some situations. Otherwise, you can go directly to the company. Another one is called Bark. It's like a watchdog. And, these apps that are independent like this are maybe $1 to $2 a month. I mean, it's not expensive at all to do that. And if you have children, as a parent, kids don't necessarily know that this isn't an appropriate thing. They think it's another cinnamon challenge. So you need to stay on top of what's going on with these kids.
Dr. John Huber joining us from Austin, Texas, here on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM with Kevin Miller in the morning. You go to the Cinnamon Challenge and the Tide Pool Challenge and everything else, these challenges can be deadly, are deadly.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, they can. cinnamon, oh, well, that's just the spice. Well, it gets into your lungs and it causes scar tissue, and you can have permanent lung damage. And that's definitely no good. I see lots of people with major lung problems in the hospitals that I have privileges at. And you don't want to mess with that. You don't want to mess with the Tide Pod Challenge. I can't even believe, initially I couldn't believe that was happening. And then I started looking at the actual data and the information from the CDC, and it's like, wow, people are actually doing these things. And we have to remember kids' brains are not fully developed. They don't think like adults. They don't say, A plus B equals C. It's A plus B equals whatever I want it to be. And they think they're impervious to damage and are not going to get hurt.
Dr. Huber, how scary is it when we, our kids are on their phones all the time and they're playing these games and all of a sudden they get solicited by these apps? Most parents are, they've still come up in the age of television, or maybe they're watching Netflix on a tablet or something. How do you get into the mind of your kid or even to the phone of your kid to see what they're up to?
Well, and that's why I say let's utilize the apps that are out there already to protect us and our children, and using some of these antivirus apps that are on our desktops we're familiar with, we trust them, and they actually have people in their companies that monitor all the new apps that are coming out there, so we don't have to be versed in all of them. And like I said, it's $1 or $2 a month, and our kids are definitely worth it. The other side to it is talk to your kids. Say, look, these challenges are not safe. They may look like they're fun, but we don't want you doing them unless you come and talk to us about them. And just be honest with your children, and they tend to respond really well, especially when you give them guidelines and boundaries, because, again, they don't think like adults do, and they're looking for structure. And, kind of right now we let our cell phones do that for them. We know cell phone time can actually lead to depression, and it's actually identified as a causal factor for depression when kids are on it more than 2 hours a day. So we got to stay on top of what our kids are doing.
Dr. John Huber, clinical forensic psychologist, joining us here. MainstreamMentalHealth.org, the chairman for Mainstream Mental Health, a nonprofit organization that brings lasting and positive change to the lives of individuals that suffer from mental health issues. We're hearing a lot about what's going on in the Supreme Court and the Catholic Church and all. Dr. Huber, your thoughts on how victims, particularly those that have been hurt as children, particularly the victims of the pedophile priests, how does one get over that? How does one get over that trauma, or do they not?
Well, a lot of people do. It's amazing how resilient children are, and if the rest of their life is relatively solid and firm, they're gonna deal with it in their own way, and that's where once we find out as adults that we've got a kid or somebody exposed to that, we should get them into appropriate therapy so that they can learn appropriate coping mechanisms. But the majority of kids who experience that grow up to be upstanding adults, and they grow up to be very well versed in what can be bad in this world, and they actually become advocates for kids in most situations. So, it's not going to cause them to become pedophiles themselves, although some people who do become pedophiles were abused. Most of the people who get abused never become that.
How does an institution or people in power rationalize covering it up, though?
Oh, it's fear of loss of power, fear of loss of control, and people who are not actually perpetrators become complicit because they're afraid of the reactions. Because, it's the old story, one ant's not a big deal, but a whole bunch of ants can overpower even adults and humans. So we don't want to let all the people who come to us for service get that power, because then they lose it. And it's really an amazing dichotomous kind of situation that creates what we call this cognitive dissonance, where we know it's wrong, but the cost may be too great for us to go after that. So we go ahead and protect these people, which is a shame. And in reality, if they stand up and defend these kids, the church actually becomes stronger and organizations become stronger. So it's just a very incongruent way of thinking that it's easily wrapped up in that whole enmeshment of services and what we're trying to do versus what's actually going on. And it's a scary thought that we can do that.
Well, you go to the case of Jerry Sandusky, and you have Joe Paterno, you have Mike McCrory, an assistant coach at the time. He reports on Paterno, and nothing happens. But if you're, and this is what I haven't understood, Dr. Huber, if you're a young guy, and I understand we all have to make money, we all have to do these things, but to sit there and let that go on and to physically watch it, I don't know how Mr. McCrory, and again, it's very easy to judge, how he could not just, yell at Sandusky and get him off that kid. And then the whole, as you said, cognitive dissonance of covering that up and for years and years, how does that happen?
Well, it's not something that they plan on making happen. It's something they don't know how to deal with. They just want to ignore it, and hopefully it goes away. Most people are afraid of things like that. Maybe they actually experienced something like that as a child, and it could have triggered some psychological reaction in them, and they just wanted to bury it in their memories. I wasn't there. You weren't there. We don't know what the individual was going through. And I know that's kind of weak considering we know what the kids were going through, and that's evil. But, in that moment, people do crazy things. And that's why I think we need to be able to talk about these topics out in the open. And if you know of something like this, even if it's just a suspicion, you need to go to authorities. You need to talk to people about it, follow up on it, and make sure that people aren't doing these types of things. And if they are doing it, that they're not getting away with it.
Right. And Dr. Huber, though, these are based on McCrory's own statements that he made.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
And my whole rationale is you have to live with yourself.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the most important things, I think, is being able to sleep at night, because if you can't, you're going to fall apart. And somehow he justified it. I can't answer for him. I wish,
sure.
Maybe someday I'll get access to him and be able to sit down and do some psychological testing. I know that we're always out there trying to get a hold of these people so we can understand it better. Otherwise, we kind of know, like cognitive dissonance, we kind of know the mechanism, but we don't really know the experience. At least I hope most other psychologists don't, because, that would probably mean that they're complicit and have done something like that too. So it's scary.
Dr. Huber, finally, why do people, and I'm 50, my generation, and maybe the one previous, we have such an aversion to therapy? And the reason why, we were always taught we have to cope with it, and yet the younger people seem to get the values of therapy, and they don't vilify it. And as I'm coming around to it, I'm thinking about it. Then I go to my doctor's office, and the first thing they want to know is if you're in therapy, as if that's bad. But we're taught, and people should be encouraged to go to therapy, yet we have the intrusion from the medical establishment wanting us to know if we're in counseling. Again, a convoluted collection of statements there, but your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, it's one of the reasons why we started Mainstream Mental Health, which you can also get to by going to drpsycho.org. That's DRPSYCHO.
Wait a minute, Dr. Psycho?
It's easier to remember than Mainstream Mental Health.
Roger.
So, but the whole idea is that therapy itself is something that we think of, oh, you must be broken. There must be something wrong with you to go see a therapist. And the reality of it is we go to dentists when we don't have cavities. We do checkups. And a good therapist is going to be there to give you coping strategies and coping skills. You talk about, we were taught, our generation, the generations before us were taught, oh, you need to learn to deal and cope and stand up on your own 2 feet. Well, we learned how to do math with a teacher. Why would we not do, the same thing, learn how to cope with these different things that have never happened to us before, with a trainer? Essentially, that's what a therapist is in a lot of ways, is teaching you different ways to cope and ways to deal with different pressures and stressors. And if you just go to a therapist when there's nothing wrong, you got a couple advantages there. If you go once a year, maybe once every 2 years, and you meet a therapist and you know they're there, that is an advantage for you. If you never need that therapist, you're probably somebody who the world goes to, your friends. Hey, this is happening. I don't know what to do. And you may think, hey, this guy needs a therapist. But now you know somebody. You go, hey, I got a friend over here. I've talked with him before or her before, and I know they're a good person. Go see them, as opposed to let's go find a therapist, and all of a sudden everybody's scared and they back off. It is very difficult to admit that sometimes we need help, and it's a very hard thing for our generation to say, I have to go and get help from somebody. But that's the trademark of being a true professional, is knowing where your boundaries are and knowing when you need to get your professional help, whether it's at work or, whether you're a coach and you need a new defensive coordinator because, they're running a new offense you haven't seen before.
Oh, Dr. Huber, we appreciate you. One more time, your websites. I love that Dr. Psycho one.
drpsycho.org. That's DRPSYCHO. And then you can also get us at mainstreammentalhealth.org. It's the same website, just different pathways.
Well, we'd love to have you back, and thank you for letting us, again, the Momo Challenge. If you see that on your kid's phone, delete it and get them to someone who's a professional. Is that right, sir?
Definitely. That's it. And you might check out getting some of those programs like Bark or Semantics to monitor that so you don't have to know all the apps that are out there.
Thank you, sir. Take care, Dr. Huber.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a great day.
You too. Our great friend, Dr. John Huber from Boise, now living in Austin, Texas, the Momo Challenge. And I know you're kind of chuckling. No, it's called the Momo Challenge. Should not be on your kid's phone. And certainly what's going on in the Catholic Church, what's going on in any church, really, for that matter. And let's hope that it isn't. Coming up next, a prayer for North Carolina and South Carolina. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning. And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning. And before we get rolling here today with the latest on Judge Kavanaugh, a few things. And I don't know really where we begin, but for those folks that a year ago survived the hurricane in Puerto Rico, the people in North Carolina, and all those folks that are suffering from these natural disasters, we are so blessed in our country. Really, we are so blessed to be able to get up, whether we live in an apartment, a house, townhome, trailer, a tent, whatever you want to say. We are so blessed to have shelter over our heads. And this is one of the reasons why we love partnering every year, twice a year, with the Boise Rescue Mission, because of the economic uncertainty that we all have, or maybe some of us have. But I was doing some research, and we think water and rain is not a big deal. And then we have those folks in North Carolina and South Carolina that, everything's flooded. Remember how big the flooding was last year here, that the Boise River flooded. But imagine going back to your home and it's still flooded, and it's going to take weeks to get the water out. And then you've got to replace the drywall, the insulation, the furniture. Oh, yeah, you've got to work. Maybe you've got to replace your cars. And I understand that they have insurance, but you deal with a bureaucracy. How fun is that? And I know the folks at the insurance places mean well, but still. So I would just like to offer this prayer for all those people that are suffering. Lord, please help those people in need right now, whether it's through poor health, whether it's poor decisions, whether it's in North Carolina or some parts of the world, or here in Idaho, that people are going through a trauma, that they are carrying their cross. Please give them the light of your word, Lord. Please help them and know that they are loved, and allow them to get through that, because no one wants to give up hope, and no one wants to not have a place to share. And whether you have a traditional family or a non-traditional family, a four-legged furry family, Lord, please give them comfort and shelter. In your word we pray, amen. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio.
Jim Duthie.
Thank you, Jim. As I've said, imagine, when we have a hiccup, when we have a flat tire, when something breaks in our home, maybe a pipe breaks and we have to call in the people that clean that stuff up. Imagine doing that for an entire house, an entire neighborhood, where the roads don't work anymore because they're underwater. On one hand, for us in Idaho, it makes us appreciate what we have. On the other hand, I ask you to please pray for those people right now. They need us. They need us. Coming up next, the latest on Judge Kavanaugh. We'll get your thoughts on that at 580-5436. 580-KIDO. It looks like the young lady doesn't want to testify. And you have some people saying, based on unsubstantiated allegations, non-collaborated allegations, that the FBI should be called in. We'll tell you what the president had to say about that next. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you, Dave Ramsey. Jeff Manasso joins us now from Fox News Radio with a troubling story out of Utah. Jeff, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin.
So Elizabeth Smart, one of her kidnappers, has been released, and she's not too happy about it.
Yeah, 72-year-old Wanda Barzee left a state prison in suburban Salt Lake City yesterday, a free woman, after helping her husband kidnap a then 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart back in 2002 and attempting another kidnapping. We know that Smart was held captive and raped for 9 months and before being rescued in a story that just captivated the nation and really the world. But Barzee cooperated with prosecutors and testified against her husband in the Smart case. You may remember she tried, or Barzee and Brian David Mitchell tried to kidnap Smart's cousin, Jessica Wright, whose screen on her bedroom window was cut before the dog in the house started barking, and the father let the dog out, went straight to the window, went straight to the fence, and so that was an attempt. And it's believed that this couple, or Brian David Mitchell, was trying to build a collection of multiple wives, and so anyway, she was sentenced for the Smart case and for that state time and federal time, and it was the Parole and Prisons Board in Utah that deciphered that she had already had time served, recalculated the amount of time she served. And that's when they came up with the decision that she should be let go, that she served her time, and she's paid her due, though we've heard from Elizabeth Smart basically saying that this was a shock, calling it disappointing, the decision to let Barzee go. And she calls Barzee a continued threat to not only her and her family, but to the entire community in Salt Lake City.
And obviously a huge national story today and back in the day. And Elizabeth Smart, as you said, has vowed to go on with her life, although she did state that she did not agree with this decision.
She didn't agree. And again, she calls Barzee a threat, though Barzee's public defender yesterday said that it's unfair and counterproductive to assert that she's a threat without reliable evidence, and he says there is no evidence that suggests that she is a threat and that she's going to go out into the community and she's going to cooperate with her probation officer. She'll be monitored by a federal probation officer for the next 5 years. And if she messes up, she'll go back to prison. And Smart has been assured by federal probation officers that they're going to be watching Barzee extremely closely. If she does mess up, she will go back to jail.
You think at 72, what does she have left? And, Jeff Manasso is a veteran reporter. Can you recall back many years ago when this was huge, and not only Elizabeth Smart, people feared that she was dead, but when people found her and, she bravely told what happened to her eventually? Well,
first of all, 72-year-olds can be very dangerous. Just because she's 72 and in that later stage in her life doesn't make her, not dangerous. Secondly, yeah, I do remember this vividly, and I was captivated by it, and particularly when she was rescued and the story surrounding her survival She was out with a series that just aired this last year or so, or last fall, or earlier this year. That was just incredible, where she described in detail, from day one all the way up until her rescue. And she's as strong as they come. Elizabeth Smart, now 30 years old, married with kids of her own. She's been an advocate for other victims, and so it's a great story. And it ended well for Elizabeth Smart, thank God. Barzee and Brian David Mitchell, who's serving life in prison, by the way. I mean, they're if this was my family, I would, how do you feel if this hits home to you and your co-conspirator who helped kidnap you sat beside her co-conspirator as he raped Elizabeth Smart? How would you feel if they are out? And so those are the emotions that we're seeing from Elizabeth Smart, and rightfully so.
And the story continues. Jeff Manasso, we always appreciate you. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Jeff Manasso joining us on KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning here. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM. And before we get to the Judge Kavanaugh thing, there is a local story that is getting a lot of national interest. And you've got a ruling by, these courts deciding that the city of Boise cannot enforce an ordinance banning people from sleeping on the sidewalk. You heard Doug Petcash mention it earlier. Here is the latest from our news partners at Channel 7.
After nearly a decade, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled the city of Boise can't prosecute people for sleeping on streets.
I think it's a huge step in the understanding of the system that's not in place for those who experience homelessness.
The Court of Appeals sided with 6 homeless people from Boise after they sued the city in 2009 over an ordinance that banned people from sleeping in public spaces.
We talk about Boise being a livable city. Well, it should be livable for everybody, poor and rich alike, housed and unhoused alike.
4 years ago, Boise changed its anti-camping rule to say homeless campers could not be cited if all local homeless shelters were full. But the court ruled that didn't fix the problem.
Now the city has to come up with real solutions to address the homelessness issue. And that's the best part of this. No more laws that specifically target homeless individuals.
Howard Belodoff, the Associate Director for Idaho Legal Aid Services, says the solution is more affordable housing.
There has been some progress in the last 10 years or so, but not enough. We have many families living in cars in the city of Boise, and you can close your eyes to it and you don't see it, but it's there.
Right now, the city says it is taking a closer look at the decision and trying to decide what the best path forward is.
It could likely go a couple of different ways, but 2 possible scenarios could be asking for a reconsideration in front of the entire panel of the Ninth Circuit, as opposed to just the appeals panel. And then also another option is appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Tuesday's ruling could have far-reaching impact.
This ruling will ripple through every city, practically every city in the United States, because it for the first time establishes that homeless people cannot be singled out and punished for sleeping or lying or sitting.
And there we have it. Look, it is a big fear. Last half hour, if you were listening, we're praying people that have lost their homes. But is there a difference between people that have lost their homes, are destitute, are trying to get back into society, and some people that just choose to live on the streets? Washington, D.C. We did our show there a couple weeks ago, and I want to thank everyone that gave us such outstanding compliments on the program. That was due to Ray Amaya and our folks at FAIR. But if you've ever visited a big city, it doesn't have to be Washington, D.C. I know a lot of people love the Seattle Seahawks. Dave Petzo goes to Seattle. A lot of folks, they love to vacation in San Francisco. A beautiful city after they pressure wash the sidewalks, as they do in Seattle, to get rid of the urine and the human feces from the homeless people or people that use the sidewalks as urinals or toilets or what have you. Portland having the same issues. The city of Boise decided, look, you're going to get a citation. Remember, and I don't know if this is the case a few years ago, and if you're just moving to the area, this is a little history. You had people camping in the parks. Now, you don't want the parks to turn into the campsite for the homeless. Everybody has to have a home. And once again, this shows you, whether you like Donald Trump or not, the need to revise that despicable Ninth Circuit that continues to be out of whack with the entire country. If the city of Boise wants to cite someone, what are they going to do to a homeless person? Here's a ticket. Is the homeless person going to pay it? Chances are, if they don't have money for a home or food, God forbid, they're not going to have money for a ticket. But to limit the city's ability to enforce basic sanitary statutes is just a road to chaos, right? If we don't enforce the rules, if we don't enforce basic hygiene, what are we going to do? So when you're in a big city, have you noticed this? And in Salt Lake, man, you go to Salt Lake around Temple Square. You go to Salt Lake around the downtown florist, around some of the big TV stations, around the arena downtown. You see the homeless, and they're not like the homeless here. They're the mean homeless. Told you I had a guy pull a knife on me. He wanted to sell it to me. And by the grace of God, he didn't use it on me. But you have these folks circulating and such, and some of them, because of the cutbacks in mental health, this is where they go. They're thrown on the streets. Now, again, we live in a great place where you have people donating. I mean, second to Utah when it comes to donations and charitable giving. But the city of Boise should be allowed to say, look, you can't sleep on the sidewalk, right? It's cruel and unusual punishment to give somebody a citation, to give somebody a demerit. Do you understand this? Because I certainly do not. And again, if we could all go back into the hot tub time machine, would we all become lawyers? Probably not, because we really don't want to know how the sausage is made when it comes to our legal system. But at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, certainly the city has a right to give somebody a demerit if they're trespassing on public property. And when you go to one of these big cities, you have people saying, look, here's my old military ID. I'm a veteran. Of course, they always do it in a place full of tourists at a public square, and they eyeball you. I was running around with a Bowie hat, a very sweaty Bowie hat, in the nation's capital. Maybe this happened to you in Seattle or Salt Lake or Portland or wherever. And I had a home. Hey, man, I love your hat. How about $1? And if you put in the time there, you can make $50, $100, $200 a day off the generosity of people. Look, we don't want people, whether they're victims of this horrific flood in North Carolina, whether they're victims of their own ineptness, whether they just had bad luck to lose anything. But there have to be rules. There has to be order. Right? Conservative
Hello?
Steve joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Conservative Steve.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to have you with us, brother.
Oh, always a pleasure, Kevin. Got out a little earlier today and was chatting with. Always listen to your program. It's a great program. My thought is this. You know, the three guys on the Ninth Circuit. I just wonder if they would be open to let folks stay on their gated communities and their properties if they need a place to stay, when they need a place to stay. I'm just wondering if they'd be open to that, and anyone else who's okay with this. You know, it's just like I always see these signs, refugees welcome, you know, with all the tree huggers around here. Well, how many are you keeping at your house is what I would like to know.
Really?
Yeah, I would really like to know that. I see these stickers all over Boise, refugees welcome. Welcome where? Somebody else's place at somebody else's expense, or are they welcome at your house is what I'd like to know.
Or the illegals.
Or whatever. I'm just saying, you know, everyone's riding around with all the stickers on their bumpers, and I hope Liberal Steve's listening because maybe he has an answer as well. Everyone's really willing to give away everyone else's property and rights, but not their own. I'm just curious to that. Maybe you can help me.
Well, you know, Conservative Steve, it's the old do as I say, not as I do, everybody.
Well, exactly right, and it's like this. There's no consequences for anything anymore, and that's the property. That's the problem.
Well, and we're all victims. We're all
just like
victims.
All these liberals, they throw a tantrum because Trump won the White House. Hey, look, I didn't care for Obama's policies and his 8 years, but like I said, I go back to the same thing. I didn't burn cars, shoot out windows, and throw a tantrum and everything else every day because I didn't like it. We just dealt with it and went to the next level, and now the guy won, and deal with it, you little whiners, you little crybabies. That's the problem. The good book says, spare the rod, you will spoil the child, and that's what's happened to this society right now. A lot of these people right now, they just missed a lot of good spankings when they were young enough, and they don't respect anybody or anything. So it's really unfortunate to see it take place, but it'll all work out.
Conservative Steve, thank you for the call.
You have a great day, Kevin. Keep up the good work.
All right, you as well. And to our friend, our daily listeners, Suzanne, listening right now. Good morning, Suzanne. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Taking your calls on the issues that matter to you, Treasure Valley. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Earl in Meridian, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Kevin. Great show, great staff. Love it. Just had to let you know, this goes back to something I've harped about before with the law that they're messing with by the Ninth Circuit of we're losing the battle of language. He said that we're targeting and singling out the homeless. It seems to me the law is being applied equally to everyone, just like we don't target and single out murderers. They break the law, and we have passed the law. They're breaking it. And we are enforcing the laws that are on our books. And, if it was you or I sleeping on the sidewalk, we would get ticketed or arrested or whatever the appropriate action is as well. So I don't see how they're winning that battle again of language of targeted and singling out. Just frustrates me to no end that they get those battles out there and think that we're really messing with the homeless.
Look, I think a city has a right to enforce laws and codes and especially sanitary conditions.
And to even go further, what happens if it's the winter and it's bitter cold out and it's a safety concern? We can't just force somebody if all the shelters are full. We can't force them to come with us and go into some sort of protective custody, but we can use that ordinance to do so. So, I get frustrated by the loss of language, just like we're losing it with Judge Kavanaugh. It's not that she's the accuser and he's the accused. He's the perpetrator and she's the victim. And language like that matters. People hear that and they think, oh, he must be the perpetrator. He must not be the accused. So.
We appreciate you. Thank you, Earl.
Bless you. Bless your staff. You guys have a great day.
All right. You as well. Appreciate it. Traffic and weather together. KIDO Talk Radio.
Jim Duthie.
All right. Kevin Miller in the morning. KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Good morning, Hank.
Good morning. Let me put it this way to series of questions. When I first visited Salt Lake City in 1970, there was none of that around in that area. The area you're talking about is just west of Rio Grande, where there's a mall just before you get to Temple, and just west of that is where all the homeless are. And I was in that area back in 2016, the last time I was in Salt Lake City. And I agree with you. They're a scary bunch. In fact, they gave me the creep. But the point getting at is what has changed. Why all of a sudden, 40, 50 years later, we've got mobs of these people in our major cities, and it looks like we're probably going to develop a similar problem in Boise. And my feeling about Mayor Beater is that I think the Beater probably agrees with the Sixth Circuit thing. It probably doesn't bother him having sleeping on the sidewalk. It probably gives him an excuse to perpetuate the Democrat brand of handling the homeless. But wouldn't it be better to get somebody like maybe Reverend Wright and people who deal with these people to get on the Bears conference, come up with maybe solutions?
Great point, Hank.